Okay, so I'm Dr. Ashish Singh from the Department of Surgical Gastroenterology, and we'll be discussing today the nutritional evaluation of a surgical patient. We all know that nutrition is very important for any patient. It affects his or her outcome, and more so in a surgical patient following this, following any surgery or any planned uh, treatment. So we'll be going through what is burden of malnutrition in our patients. What does surgery do, so that we can understand how does this is very important. How is it is very important in surgical patients. Why should we evaluate nutrition in all patients? Whom are to be specifically looked in? When we should start evaluation? And what are the tools available to evaluate nutrition in surgical patients? And finally, the conclusion. Malnutrition is very common in our patients. It has been published and seen in many studies that almost 80% of patients who are hospitalized have malnutrition. More so in cancer patients, almost 4 of 5 patients are malnourished. And it is further like this, like 25 to 30% of patients develop malnutrition, become malnourished in hospitalized period. So it is very important and very common problem with all clinicians facing in their patients, especially surgical groups. So malnutrition can develop because of decreased intake or increased demand of nutrients following any trauma, clinical illness, sepsis, severe burn, or major surgeries. So now coming to the surgical stress response, any surgery is a trauma to the patient, which leads to acute stress and a state of metabolic activation through activation of various endocrine mechanisms and cytokine releases, which by this time body tries to conserve salt and water to maintain plasma volume, increases cardiac output and oxygen consumption to meet the systemic delivery of nutrients and oxygen rich blood. It also mobilizes energy reserves like glycogen, adipose tissue, or lean body mass to maintain energy process and repair tissues and synthesize protein involved in immune response. What all this leads to? Hyperglycemia and whole body protein catabolism, which leads to wasting of lean body mass, especially the muscle mass. So why do we need this evaluation in any patient, especially surgical patient? So what does this malnutrition do? It causes lots of like many post-operative problems in our patients, leading to wound adhesions, poor healing, breakdown of surgical anastomosis, poor immune response, leading to many infections. So overall, it increases post-op morbidity and mortality. It prolongs ICU stay, overall hospital stay, and increases cost of the uh, hospitalized patients, cost of the treatment. So malnutrition, non-specifically, it depresses nervous system, which leads to apathy, drowsiness, inability to clear secretions, loss of lean body mass, which increases like work for the breathing, and respiratory system will be affected, and patient may require ventilation dependency. Reduced cardiac output, cardiac contractility leading to cardiac problems, impaired renal functions leading to renal failure. Patients are emotionally and behaviorally affected, leading to apathy, which further leads to delayed functional recovery in these patients. And these patients are prone to sepsis, multi-organ failure. Many are our surgical patients who are cancer affected may require many adjunct treatments like chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and response to these chemotherapy or radiotherapy will be affected in malnourished patients. More so, these therapy by itself can worsen this malnutrition status of the patient. We know that this is a modifiable risk factor. So, several controlled trials and meta-analysis have shown that in patients with moderate to severe malnutrition, if they have been treated and their nutrition has been optimized preoperatively, the postoperative morbidity can be reduced by 20% and postoperative mortality can be reduced by nearly 10%. Whom to evaluate? There is a risk stratification, risk factors associated with malnutrition in patients. These are patient-related factors, disease-related factors, or treatment-related factors. Elderly patients, sepsis patient with sepsis, chronic diseases, diabetes, organ impairment, neuromuscular diseases, and so on, or past history of major gastrointestinal surgery, which can lead to decreased oral intake as well as digestive problems, may be a risk factor for patients to develop malnutrition. Disease related factors may be those diseases where the symptoms are dysphagia, nausea, vomiting, pain, which can reduce their oral intake, or diarrhea, indigestion, which can reduce their digestive power. Patients having upper gastrointestinal cancers because of again reduced oral intake, locally advanced diseases, metabolic diseases, and treatment related factors, patients receiving chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or polymedication, or patients on corticosteroid therapy. Based on this risk stratification, patients with the risk of malnutrition can be stratified from group 1 to group 4 in increasing order of their risk. So apart from group 1, all these group 2 to 3, 4 require nutritional evaluation in their workup from the very beginning. Like group 1 is patient where there is no malnutrition nor any risk factors as mentioned in table 1, and these patients do not have any surgery which can lead to high risk of morbidity. Group 2 are patients with who are not malnourished but having at least one risk factor, or they have surgery with high risk of morbidity. Group 3 are patients who are malnourished and surgery which is not at high risk of morbidity. Group 4 are patients who are already malnourished and surgery is also associated with very high risk of morbidity. So all these patients except group 1 needs nutritional evaluation in their workup. When to start evaluation? So we know that malnutrition can worsen the prognosis. So it should be started, their evaluation and management should be started from the beginning. Other treatments, like especially in cancer patients, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, can predispose or worsen the malnutrition. So it should be started before the start of any treatment for these patients. We also know that resistance to refeeding can develop in severely malnourished patients. So we should not let these patients to reach that stage where resistance to refeeding can develop. So we should start optimization from the very beginning. And we should start preoperative diagnosis of malnutrition and treatment early so that we have at least 2 to 3 weeks time before surgery to optimize our surgical results. There is no clear consensus about timing to start evaluation and nutritional optimization, but the European recommendation is to screen for and manage nutrition as soon as oral intake falls in any patient. How to evaluate? There are multiple tools available. But first of all, we have to screen a patient who is malnourished or who is at the risk of malnutrition. So those patients who have very recent onset of weight loss, more than 10% in 6 months, or having weight loss more than 5% in a month, those experiencing near or complete starvation for 5 or more than 5 days, where recovery duration is anticipated to be prolonged. All these are patients where we have to evaluate nutrition aggressively. So what tools we have available? Ideally, a tool should be sensitive, accurate, reproducible, applicable to all patients at bedside, and cost effective. Simultaneously, it should be able to assess the risk of morbidity and mortality and to predict which patient will benefit from nutritional supplementation. As with any evaluation of a patient, here again, evaluation start with history, physical examination, then going to laboratory values and other methods of evaluation. History is very important in nutritional evaluation because it can give you the cause for nutritional compromise so that you can correct that problem specific to that particular patient. You should ask for in these patients about their oral intake, how much are they taking, what is the quantity and quality of the food they are taking, lack of any specific food group, use of supplements, ability to chew or swallow, their satiety status, whether they are having early satiety, dyspepsia, vomiting, bowel habits. which may signify their indigestion, status of indigestion. Symptoms related to vitamin and trace element deficiency should also be inquired. Coming to the tools which are specific, first is like body weight, which is very simple, but where we can compare the body weight, present body weight with the previous personal data or ideal body weight. It has been found that if there is more than 10% of weight loss in 6 months time, these patients behave very poorly in post-operative period. So ideal body weight can be calculated by many formulas. Most of commonly used is Divine or Broca's index formula, by which we can calculate the ideal body weight for a person. What are the limitations of this body weight evaluation, which can in evaluation of nutrition? It relies on comparison. So for a particular patient, previous data of that same patient may not be available. And if we compare it with the ideal body weight, it depends on it's a normal range of a normal value. So limited by diversity of control population. It may not be actually signifying for a particular patient, like whether it is deranged or not. Weight loss determined by history is limited by its poor predictive value, and recent loss or gain in weight do not directly relate to their similar or proportional change in nutritional status. What is next? This is body mass index, which is like body weight in kilograms divided by height in meter square, the square of the height in meters. The aim of this body mass index is to limit the problems of body weight where we need some comparison. It has been found that BMI less than 18.5 kilograms per meter square leads to longer hospital stay, ICU stay, increased post-operative complications, readmissions, as well as delay in patient's recovery. Limitation of this body mass index in evaluation of nutrition is it does not take account of change in the nutritional status. Poor sensitivity with the baseline assessment, particularly in overweight patients. In an individual with high normal range can undergo significant weight, before which this particular fixed value can tell you that patient is having nutritional problem. Comorbidities where underhydration is there or which can lead to edema or ascites like renal failure, liver diseases or malignancy can confound this calculation. However, this body mass index is a very useful day-to-day practice tool, particularly in patients with low range of body mass index, especially where the benefit of nutritional intervention lies. Next comes is anthropometry, where we assess the mid-arm circumference by which gives muscle mass, triceps or subscapular skin fold thickness, which gives us index of body fat. Limitation of anthropometry is it is observer, like there's significant observer variance, and the particular fixed for value for a particular person depends on his or hand dominant arm or hand dominance. Its poor accuracy and specificity has been documented by many papers where they have found like up to 30% of patients were labeled malnourished by this anthropometric measures. Its limitation in elderly patients because of variability in age-related changes. There is no reference database and absence of correlation factor with age, hydration, and physical activity, and not useful in acute illnesses. Up to this, we have examined like history and examination by which we can assess the nutrition, but we should know that it may not be sufficient in diseases where patients do not lose weight but have reduced or depleted visceral protein mass. There comes the role of investigations, especially transport proteins, which can measure visceral protein mass of the patient. First is albumin, which is manufactured in liver, half-life being 18 to 21 days. Its serum concentration depends on synthesis, degradation, loss and exchange between intra and extravascular species. Useful to assess global nutritional status, but is limited to assess acute changes. Being a negative acute phase reactant, it declines naturally during acute illnesses or in post-surgery status. So limiting its value as a factor which can show the evolution of nutrition in a patient in hospital stay or following surgery. It has been found that albumin less than 3.5 grams has been associated with increased morbidity in patients. And in our clinical practice, although these are the limitations, but in our clinical practice, day-to-day routine practice, serum albumin, which is very inexpensive, is a good prognostic marker, particularly for chronically ill patients. Then is pre-albumin and transferrin. Having a shorter half life, these have increased sensitivity to the change in nutritional status, but their limitations are erratic response to stress and illnesses and their excessive cost. So in day-to-day practice, they are less reliable and inadequate for routine practice. Similarly, other markers which can be used are insulin-like growth factor, serum cholesterol, urinary nitrogen, urea nitrogen, creatine height index, and delayed cutaneous hypersensitivity. But and these have been found to have good correlation with nutrition, but the limitation is again same as with pre-albumin and transferrin, the excessive cost. Then comes the functional capacity and muscle power. Muscle power can be assessed by like hand grip strength, their respiratory capacity. Authors have found that it to be better than weight loss assessment or arm circumference assessment, but the limitation is need of patient's cooperation and influence of these assessments of narcotic because of narcotic analgesics and sedatives, especially in ICU settings. Another tool is subjective global assessment, which is a combination of history and examination. It was first described by Baker in 1982. It's a very simple method which can be done by paramedical staff. It has history and physical examination part. In history, weight changes, dietary intake change, gastrointestinal symptoms, functional capacity, disease acts relation to the nutritional status are assessed. And in physical examination, loss of subcutaneous fat, muscle wasting, ankle edema, sacral edema, and ascites are assessed. Then it has been like on the basis of these components, SGA can categorize patients into well-nourished, moderately nourished, and severely malnourished patients. Components of this can affect that affect rating mostly are muscle wasting, loss of subcutaneous fat, and pattern of body mass. SGA, many other studies have shown their usefulness in surgical patients where they have found it to be signifying patients' post-operative outcome. Another tool we have is malnutrition universal screening tool, where we assess BMI on the basis of which we categorize patients into 0, 1, 2. And patients' weight loss in 3 to 6 months, again categorizing patients into 0 to 2, less than 5%, 5 to 10%, more than 10%, and acute disease effect, which means like if there is any no nutritional intake or reduced nutritional intake for more than 5 days because of any disease, that will give a factor of 2 to the as in the assessment of final outcome. So then overall risk of malnutrition on the basis of this can be assessed to low, patient having 0 score, medium in patients having 1 score, or 2 or more score gives a high risk of, shows the high risk of malnutrition in patients. High risk patients should be treated with the nutritional therapy before considering any surgery. Another tool is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. We have seen that patients weight, actual weight of the patient may not reflect their malnutrition every time. So this can assess body tissue composition separately, lean body mass, fat mass, as well as bone density. So malnourished obese patients, although BMI will be higher as I discussed, lean body mass will be low, and this is called sarcopenic obesity. Surgical morbidity and mortality rates correlate more closely with lean body mass than absolute body mass. So it is very important tool to evaluate, but the limitation is its expensive cost and limited availability all over. Sarcopenia, as we discussed, it's a low skeletal muscle mass. It can also be measured with abdominal CT, cross-sectional image at the level of lumbar area, where we assess the muscle area, especially psoas muscle. where sarcopenia has been defined as less than 4.38 centimeter of the surface area. It has been seen that sarcopenic patients have high postoperative morbidity, mortality, and hospital stay. But the limitation is it cannot be advisable in all patients associated with increased cost, radiation exposure, and availability of this. In this diagram, these pictures, we can see that sarcopenic patient has very low bulk of these psoas muscles, but in a non-sarcopenic patient, good muscle mass is seen in psoas. So now, on the basis of why do we need this, these evaluations are important to initiate pre-operative nutritional support, and where to start if patient is having any previous medical history of severe undernutrition or chronic disease. Involuntary weight loss is there, 10 to 15% or usual body mass. Expected blood loss is more than 500 ml. Weight loss of 20%. Under ideal body weight, or BMI is less than 18.5 kilograms per meter square. Failures to thrive in pediatric age group. If serum albumin is less than 3 gram per deciliter, or transferrin less than 200 milligram per deciliter, or anticipated, it is in anticipation if the patient is will be unable to meet his caloric requirement within 7 to 10 days in perioperative period, or catabolic diseases where severe catabolism is occurring, like burn, trauma, sepsis, or pancreatitis. So, in conclusion, malnutrition definitely is associated with postoperative morbidities and poor recovery. It should be actively looked in all patients, and that too early in evaluation phase, so that adequate nutritional support can be given to improve surgical outcome. Ideal tool should be sensitive, accurate, reproducible, relevant in health and illness, applicable to all patients, bedside, and cost effective. But unfortunately, no test independently meet all these criteria. What remains a simple and effective strategy is SGA combined with few easily obtainable objective parameters such as albumin and BMI, which is most commonly being this is most commonly being followed in most of the clinical settings and hospitals, and we are also following these, especially BMI and albumin, to assess nutrition of the patient. Thank you for patience listening. In case of any question, I'll be happy to answer.